eunuch had faith, so he was taken from this life. He didn't die, he just couldn't be found. God had taken him away. Before God took him, Enoch was praised as one who pleased God.
Our theme is Catching Fire, Igniting Our Faith in God. Abraham's faith is seen clearly in his life. It's a wonderful example of what ours can be as we grow closer to God. Today I would like to consider specifically the story of Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son Isaac. Let's review the story together by reading Genesis chapter 22. Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. Then he said, Take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I shall tell you. So Abraham arose early in the morning and saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son. And he split the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey, the lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you. So Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and the 2 of them went together. But Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, My father. And he said, Here I am, my son. Then he said, Look, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering. So the 2 of them went together. Then they came to the place of which God had told him, and Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order. He bound Isaac his son, laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. So he said, Here I am. And he said, Do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Then Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up for a burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the name of the place, The Lord will provide, as it is said to this day, In the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time out of heaven, and said, By myself I have sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this thing, and have not withheld your son, your only son. Blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply your descendants, as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is on the seashore. And your descendants shall possess the gate of their enemies. In your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. For 3 days Abraham walked to a given place where he was to sacrifice his son. 3 days. That was 3 days to think, consider, ponder what he was going to do. But he didn't falter. He could have contemplated an escape plan, a way to justify not obeying God to save his son. How would others view his actions when he came home without Isaac? His own people could accuse him of being a second Cain. The surrounding nations might see it as confirmation of their evil practice of sacrificing their own children to their gods. What would happen to his example then? But Abraham did not make excuses. He trusted that God would not steer him in the wrong direction. He stood firm. Like him, we should be careful not to make allowances for disobedience, nor should we allow the thought of what others think sway us from our divine calling. We should stand firm in our faith by stepping forward in obedience. God had promised his son to Abraham long ago. Abraham had waited until he thought it was too late, and finally, when Sarah was too old to give birth, Isaac was miraculously born. Now God wanted Abraham to sacrifice him. I wonder what Abraham was thinking as he looked at Isaac's face, as he was raising the knife. His heart must have been shattering at the thought of his son's death and suffering. Or maybe he didn't look down at all. Maybe he looked up. Maybe he didn't allow his thoughts to dwell on the painful death of his son, but clung to the promise of God and to his understanding of who his creator and friend is. Trusting as he had done many times before that God had a plan and all would turn out okay. Abraham's faith was strong, solid, and unwavering. His faith was on fire. It's a faith we can see and use to spark our own. As Abraham didn't let what he didn't know hold him back, we can face life's trials and uncertainties with glowing faith that can't be put out.
Amen.